This is going to be a demo of my GitHub to launch production sync flow. So I have a data element here called hello world that returns a string that says hello from GitHub with a bunch of exclamation points. It also has its data element ID as a comment in the first line that ends in 771, and that's the same ID in the URL up here, 771. And if I were to go look at this data element on my website that uses the production version of this library, I can see that it's the same data element here. So let's update this on GitHub, remove all these exclamation points, and watch it go directly to production. So this repo is just a generic repo with a folder in it called data elements. That's where I am monitoring via my APIs and my webhooks and stuff. I'm monitoring changes to this data elements folder to see if any of those changes need to be synced with launch. So in this file called hello.js here, should looks pretty similar. It has the data element ID and then my code, which is the exact same thing from the current version of this data element. So if I update this file, I can do it in VS Code, or actually let's just do it on github.com. And I'll remove all these exclamation points because that's just entirely too many. And we'll save that and commit it. And so as soon as I hit commit here, this is going to trigger the flow. So the GitHub push webhook, all the lambdas that build the library, all that stuff is going to happen. And it's going to take this change from GitHub all the way through to the production version of my library and launch. So that's going to happen pretty quickly once I hit commit changes. And I have a GitHub reference of CE19. And if I refresh my publishing flow view, I can see that the development library is being built, and it has the same references you see at github.com. The UI is kind of wonky sometimes when this happens. The library will disappear sometimes, but it's being automatically promoted all the way from development to staging and then to production because the library is named GitHub with a reference ID. So if I go into this library, I can see the version of this data element this is using is the same one from GitHub without the exclamation points. So let's just give this a hard refresh and then look at my data element, and that is updated directly from GitHub without putting any code in the launch UI. So this is a pretty trivial example. So how would this work like in reality, right? So I have a data element that I use in a lot of different properties that looks like this. This is how I like to format URLs. So essentially manually composing them. So I want to use this as a data element, and I want to make sure that I manage this code in launch, for whatever reason. I'll just say this was something super complex that it'd be easier to manage in GitHub than in launch. So since the file already exists, that means I need to create a data element for this to sync with. So to do that, I'm going to do it in the UI. You could do it in the API. It's just, honestly, it's easier to do it in the UI. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to make a new data element. I'll just call this URL. And I'll make this custom code. I don't think this will let me save with that blank. Nope. So just say return nothing. And I'll hit save. And I'll hit save. And what I really need here is this guy's data element ID. So that's going to be end in 72E5. And let's do this in VS Code just because. So over to VS Code. And I actually need to fetch this so I have the latest version of everything. Okay, so now I have the latest version of this, and I want to update this URL file. So let's treat this like a regular data element. So I want to say return, and then in the first line, I'm going to paste the data element ID that I want to sync with. So just double check. That's this URL, 72E5. And I'll save that. And we will push that. So same thing as doing it on github.com. As soon as I commit this and push it, it's going to trigger a launch library build, and it should put it directly into production. All right, so refresh this. And there's my data element ID with a reference of 636. If I go to publishing flow, 636, it looks like it's stalled, but it's not. If I go back and forth, it'll be building. And that should go to production relatively soon. So 636 has this version of my data element. If I go in here, I should see that it's updated with the code from GitHub. There we go. And if I, whoops. If I refresh that, sorry for that little snafu. Get var URL. Get var URL. There we go. Just had to do a hard refresh. So that's it. That is how to set up essentially syncing data elements with files from GitHub directly and having it go straight from GitHub to launch production. A way I'm thinking about optimizing this is naming branches after launch environments. So if I had a branch called development, that would only build to development. A branch called staging, that would only build to staging, et cetera, et cetera. But that is an upcoming feature. So yeah, thanks for watching.